Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Executive AI Playbook. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today it is myself, Jamie Bykov-Brett, and Jonscott. Jonscott, did you want to do a quick introduction to say a little bit more about you and yourself?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Jamie. I'm excited to be here with you today and with you all today. My name is Jonscott. Turco. I've been an organizational psychologist for more than 30 years and a management consultant for more than 20, working across more than 50 countries. This is an exciting endeavor for Jamie and I to embark upon because we're seeing such huge feedback from potential clients and existing clients as to how AI is going to influence not just how they operate in terms of automation, which I think is the first thing, but also the bigger scale that we're going to discuss today. So happy to be here with you all.
Thanks so much. So I'm Jamie Bykov-Brett. I am a human-centric innovator, largely working in the AI sphere, AI education, and supporting people to implement, particularly SMEs, implement AI and automation in their business. As Jonscott said, there's a lot of opportunity at the moment. We are talking about AI is going to do more to change the world in the next 3 years than the internet did in the last 20. And that's why we set up this podcast today, essentially looking at how we can support leadership through this AI adoption, because essentially this is the largest digital infrastructure program that your organization is going to go through. It is going to change the game. And what we want to be able to do is support C-suite with frameworks, insights, prompts, all ethics to really understand how to be able to go about that. So the topic that we're going to be delving a bit more deeper into today is how do you align AI initiatives with real business outcomes? It's probably one of the things that we get asked most of all. At the moment, people really want to be able to quantify the impact of AI. So we're going to go into that in a second. But if you are there, I would love for you to be able to add any comments, questions, thoughts, add them into the comment section. We'll be able to see them. We'll do our best to answer them at the end of the show as well. So if there is anything else that people have, any questions that people have, then come and join us afterwards and we shall do those questions. But my first question is going to be to you, Jonscott. So we're talking about AI and really quantifying the impact of it. But how do you think that AI really shows that revenue growth? Like, how can we use it to show that growth, not just cut costs?
Good question, because I do think the majority of us think that it's just a transactional or a quick shortcut to getting some simple things done. I wrote an article recently that I published here talking about shadow AI. So I do think that we're already seeing it in some ways, but not attributing it to AI. So several of your teams, no matter what organization you're in, are using AI to tighten up budgets, to work on creative, to check messaging, to a host of things. So I do think that it's already at play. I felt it was important to start with that. And also trying to understand and maybe bring it out of the shadows. Like, let's discuss how you're using AI now. Let's discuss how we can optimize the use of it. And then let's look at how this is going to accelerate decision-making time to understand what the full scope of different initiatives may be, more so than you can do it in a series of meetings or emails or meetings that should have been emails. You know how we can talk about a lot of this. So I think that that's really the first thing, is looking at, number one, getting it out from the shadows. It's being used already. Let's just be super clear. Without hesitation, it's being used already. If we harness the power of it collectively within an organization or an industry at large, we're going to see decision-making accelerate. We're going to see kind of workshopping, let's say, become unnecessary to some degrees, because you're going to be able to see how things are more effective and contributing to your bottom line. And this is really the most important thing we're talking about, isn't it, right? We're talking about how is this going to affect bottom line success? Because it's going to drive budgets. It's going to drive investment. It's going to drive resources of all types dedicating to this. So I do think that we're poised for this, and the smart organizations are seeing it more directly.
Yeah, for sure. Like there is this disruption period at the moment, and obviously it's people coming to terms with it. And if you look at the job market statistics, we are beginning to see that really implement white collar jobs, essentially what would be traditionally middle paid. This would be the ones that you normally sit in front of a computer, that it's easy to digitize, because essentially if you're doing it digitally, we can easily train an AI on how to be able to do that. That's what we're really looking at when we're looking at improving workflow. And I talk quite a lot about your way AI is working at the moment it's your plumbing to your organization. If you're thinking about all of the different have as part of your workflow, this is where you start to get all of that different aspects of this is where we're going to connect it all together. This is how we can support that journey, that growth, those tasks to be able to take place. And I think people are often looking at a very low-hanging fruit if they're just going, oh, we had a person doing that before, and now we're going to go and get an AI to do it. What you need to be thinking about is going, well, what are the things that we weren't doing before that we could now do because we have AI there as well? And that, I think, is a much more interesting conversation, because it really starts to go, well, we can augment human capability, but we can also do things and grow our organization in a way that we could have never possibly imagined before.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we talk about, I know in my career, there's been moments where certain leaders get to a point where you need to hire an assistant. Like there's too much of that type of work that is essential, but is taking away from like the core leadership and decision making that this person needs to elevate to. Similarly, these are ways in which AI can be deployed. That's an easy one. The more difficult we're talking about, or like, how is this going to be embedded in strategy and decision making? And I think that's where you and I are working, obviously, these days. I think most leaders and most people in business haven't really crossed that bridge yet in terms of understanding this isn't just an automation tool. This is a decision-making enhancement in many ways. We're oversimplifying it, obviously, this conversation. But I guess my question for you is, as we look at all these rules and protocols, how do you meet these without at least the perception of ruining innovation? Right? I think people are seeing the benefits of AI in a simplistic way and saying, well, it's not allowing creativity. And I have, obviously a strong opposition to that. I know you do, but how do you ensure that it's not going to stifle innovation in that regard?
It is a great question. I think when you're looking at innovation at the moment, I would ask, how much innovation have organizations really been doing over the last 10, 15 years? Because when I look at organizations and the models that they're utilizing and their workflows and the way that they've worked previously, it's the same old story. In fact, the whole industrial model has been very much copy and paste. The whole point of the industrial model is that it treats people like machines, it treats organizations like machines, and we therefore cultivate people into this kind of copy and paste mentality. That's why when you're picking and you're choosing people in, you're basically trying to, upgrade different parts of your organizations, and you're moving this one out and you're moving this one in and seeing how it works. And I would say one of the things that is most important for organizations to realize is those are the things that are primed for AI to be able to do. That robotic-like thinking, the capability of copy and paste, the repetitive tasks, you don't need a human being doing that. That's not where your human beings are going to excel within your organization. But what human beings can do that AI can't do, which is where the most valuable skills are for people, is creative thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, looking at being able to solve challenges differently than it was before. And I think if you're an organization at the moment and you truly want to innovate, what you want to be doing is going, how do we leverage these human-centric skills? Because the truth is, when I talk to the majority of clients, we have this paradox that they put you in, which is, we want something innovative that no one's ever done before, that's going to really set us apart. But can you give us examples of other organizations that are doing it, how successful it's been and where it's worked really well? And you can't align those two things together. If you want to be able to innovate, you have to be able to take risks. You have to be able to be creative. And I think that's way of thinking is something we've definitely missed out on as we're talking about this AI conversation.
Yeah, it's true. And that's a great point. And I think what we're seeing is the first level, like lowest hanging fruit. I think people are mistaking for what we're talking about. Like it's not about Jamie or Jonscott or us, or the Institute coming in and just automating your process. It's the way that I explained it to someone recently is, it's as if you went from writing hand notes to type, to your computer and typing notes. Like you're still typing the notes, So if you automate that and make it faster, and AI helps you with that, you still have to think about what you're creating, and the innovation is going to come from the people. So the testing and the modeling and a lot of the other pieces can be enhanced and assisted. But really, as I said in our last call, the rise in technology and the rise in artificial intelligence needs to be met by the rise in humanistic influence, because if not, then creativity will die. If you're just relying on the AI to do everything for you, then it'll become this very simple feedback loop of very uninspired thought. And I think more importantly, it's going to definitely lack impact in a bottom line capacity. And it's going to become very transparent that this is not something that they worked on. So it's happening in a lot of different organizations now where people are just plugging in and having AI make the decisions for them. And they're not even trained GPTs. They're not even like customized. They're just using an open source GPT where they're asking for feedback. And it's just this amalgamation of every thought that ever was, which is the antithesis of originality and creativity. We're talking about, not even training a GPT on your particular styles or thought process. So I do think it's interesting.
Sorry, go for it.
No, I was going to ask you a question. When you look at this, and we're talking about, investments and such, and how do we make it so that organizations understand that these are initiatives that are worth funding, right? So it's not just a decision. I have this funny thought just popped into my head when the internet first came about. My boss at the time and I, in 1994, got one of the discs for AOL, and it was a major corporation. And that's how we accessed the internet for the very first time, was with an AOL disc and a phone line, a dial-up line. And then when we got online, and for those of you on the call who know this or who were there, and the the welcome. When the welcome was said, we looked at each other and we thought, like, what do we do with this?
What do we do now?
So I think that's kind of where we are with AI, in a sense that people understand that it's a thing. I think most people imagine this to be ChatGPT, which it's not. And it's definitely an interesting people. How do you do this? How do you demonstrate the value, as you said, to people who want something innovative and new, but they want case studies that show it's risk averse?
Yeah.
Things they are mutually exclusive. You can't do those two things.
Yeah. So the way that I see the future of work is that you kind of have an artisanal branch and you have your every other organization. Okay. And if you're not, like, I think we've used the example before, but if you go to IKEA, you can buy a chair, or you can go to somebody to go and get that chair made, and they can handcraft it, and you'll probably pay extra for the handcrafting that's made for it. But there's also going to be a market for IKEA chairs. And one of the things you want to be able to do when you're thinking about your organization is, if you are not, your value proposition isn't the fact that it's this human contact, it's the human at the center of everything, then it probably needs to be an organization that's an AI organization, in the same way that it needs to be an online organization. And when you're looking at the majority of what people are producing out there, it's a product, it's an outcome. It's not necessarily about that interaction. You don't talk about IKEA's customer service, you talk about what you get from IKEA. So therefore, being able to go around and have maybe a robot that can help point you to the different areas and stuff, or maybe go, actually, this might look good in your house based on the pictures that you're showing me and everything like that. That's as feasible as anything else. And I think that actually, if IKEA is a really good example for that. So one of the things that they've started doing is training up their entry-level staff with being more interior designers, and being able to have that stylistic taste, and being able to go, actually, this is my critical thinking, this is my creativity, this is my opinion. That's what I can bring to the table as a human being, that human experience to the IKEA shop. And yet you could still have that and go, well, that could be done by a robot if you wanted. It depends what you're trying to sell and the value you're trying to do it.
Yeah.
But the value for most organizations here is being able to go, we can do things that faster than ever before. You're popular today, Jonscott. So when you're being able to kind of run through all of these different aspects of what AI can do, it is a case of being able to put in your step-by-steps and being able to go, this is the workflow. What were we doing beforehand? And what menial tasks were people doing as part of it? Was it that somebody had to go and pick up an email and then they went and forwarded it on to somebody else? Or was it that this invoice came through to this person and then they typed in the numbers that were in it? One of my first jobs was working at a credit card company, and I literally had the paper forms and I had to go and type them into the digital system. It would, for a dyslexic, it was literally my version of hell. That is how they would torture me, because I was going, Okay, like it was not a fun experience at all whatsoever. So being able to go, well, actually, we're going to be able to put this into an AI being able to scan those forms and put it into your system. Well, now we've got that person, and we need to think about our workforce plan as well. How do we make sure that we're valuing what people bring to the workplace? And I think that will be a bit of a shift, a different way of working that all organizations need to think about. I want to kind of add on to a question to you as well, because it kind of ties off the back of what you were saying a little bit earlier. How do we set up teams and businesses so that they own the tech and that they co-own AI? So what is that interaction between the teams, businesses, and the tech?
Yeah, great question. I've put a lot of thought into this, obviously prior to our endeavor, and then now the questions are more and more. So organizations now are thinking, do I need to budget for a chief AI officer? And that's a great question, because I do think that decision making needs to be owned by someone in terms of how it's, or not by someone, by a group. Because if it's left up to each division and department, what you're going to wind up seeing, which we see happening already, is they're going to take Jamie because you showed me something on ChatGPT, so you're the most expert AI person in the team. So like you should decide on where this is going to be implemented. And I think organizationally, as we elevate this from a transactional thought process to a leadership imperative that's going to have direct bottom line results and results cascading all through the organization, there needs to be ownership of this. It doesn't need to be a budget line and an investment right now. And as organizations look to do this, I think they need to understand that this is going to have to be owned by a central area right now. Because again, the priorities, and I'm thinking of so many examples, Jamie, as we're talking about this, it goes into the concept of like, does that leader find it important to upskill their teams? Right? Take that off to the side, because if they do and they're training up their teams in general, AI has probably already been part of the conversation, right? And if they're effective leaders with teams that respect them and there's a level of trust, then they've had open conversations about who's using AI for what, how can we harness this together and make the benefits synergistic and cumulative, as opposed to like everyone kind of working in their little silos. The challenge is for organizations that just don't know what to do. And that's where you and I come in with the Institute, because organizations now are saying, well, we don't know. I think I said this last time as well. They don't know what they don't know, and they're not sure how to find it, nor where it's supposed to be implemented or how it can start. And it does draw some parallels to the kind of genesis of the internet in general. But now we're talking about things that are quantum leaps ahead of the speed and efficacy of the nascent internet 30 something years ago, right? Yeah. So I do think that this is an opportunity to say, we could have an AI task force, which is one client talking about, where there's a group of, let's say, cross-department, cross-function, cross-level, like a dozen or 20 people across larger organizations that are like the AI task force. And they're looking at processes in as effective a way as they can. Fantastic first steps, right? Yeah. If you have people that are interested in it, that are researching, that are really passionate about it. And, unlike, or should say, not unlike other new initiatives, these kind of internal task forces become departments as the as areas grow. It's true from everything from
You're welcome to say, mate. Going on that point as well would be what's really interesting is kind of looking at the kind of using AI as a tool and as an organization is kind of like going, well, actually you expect people to be able to have fundamentals to be able to use documents or to create a PowerPoint or to use an Excel. And essentially AI as a commodity within any workplace, that's going to be really important. You're going to need to be able to have that. Everybody is going to need to be skilled in that way. There's no one in your workforce who is going to be able to afford to be able to go, actually, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not an AI person. It's not my thing. When actually it would be like going, oh, I can't get onto my emails. And I don't do emails. I just go up and talk to the person at the desk. It doesn't work within these international organizations. And I think that there's a huge conversation here that needs to happen between those task force of going, this as an organization needs to meet the needs of people better. And that could be that it scales, and that could be that it could grow in ways that it never could do before. But the thing is, if you're behind on it, your competitors will be able to scale to so much faster. They will be able to reach that many more people. And if you're going to be in a competitive environment and you are competing with these organizations, you're going to be able to need to match that. And it is really a race to intelligence now. Like, it is a race to organizational intelligence, not just the implementation of the tools, but how smart can you be as an organization, both with your human-centric talent and with your AI talent as well.
That question goes, so how do you reskill staff so AI empowers them to be more effective and to not just effective at their current roles, but how do you deploy AI so that it's going to empower them and also allow them to expand their impact?
Yeah, really good question. And I think the first part of this process is not just about the technology, it's about change management. There is no point looking at the tools, and I have this with so many clients at the moment. They go, we've been thinking about HeyGen to be able to go and do this e-learning, and we've been thinking about this tool to go and do that. We think about this tool to go and do that. And the problem is with doing that is you're looking at the tools instead of going, how do we actually help the organization come on board with this? Instead of looking at the shiny object syndrome, we need to be able to go, this is a change process. And AI fundamentally threatens people in many different ways. It threatens a need for sustenance. It threatens a need when it comes to autonomy, trust, misinformation, with truthfulness, interaction, human connection. All of these things are threatened by the implementation of AI. And if you're going to get anybody to adopt it within your organization, you first need to be able to address those concerns, because they're very human concerns and they're very valid concerns, and understanding is what's going to change how people interact within those spaces. Right. You're going to need to think about talking to your staff and having those conversations and deciding what kind of organization you want to be. You are going to have to redefine. Are you going to go down that artisanal route? Are you going to go down that scalable route? Which one is it? And be able to pick that path and start to walk towards it, and then start to go, well, actually, now we know our path, we know how to be able to upskill you. And the whole point really of AI and what should happen within the workplace and what we will see over the next 5, 6, 7 years is it's not really about just having AI skills. It's about knowing how to be able to get what you want from the technology. And that the technology interface is supposed to be intuitive. If you think about websites from the 90s, right, you used to have all of your links across the top there. It had massive navigation bars. You'd have all these drop down menus and everything. And then when you look to the 2010s and everything like that, we simplified the nav bar. It's kind of got 5 or 6 different links. It's not about trying to give you everything all at once. And now what we are talking about is you've just got a text box in the middle of a screen that says, hey, what do you want? And that's what you're working with. And that's not even as intuitive as it could go. We are talking, voice interfaces. We are talking about being able to potentially do brain interfaces. We've seen studies of this where we can do brain scans and turn those brain scans into generative art functions, whatever it can be. It will literally be a case of, if you can imagine it, you can create it. And if you're thinking about upskilling your staff, you're not just thinking about how do you use this little box in the middle. You're going, how can we get them to understand that if they can ask for it, if they can think about it, that they can get it created? And that is a completely different mindset than the Industrial Revolution and the industrial workforce, where they're like, basically, you need to remember, if you can't retain, if you can't recite it, then you don't have any value. That expertise is what we're after. And now it's about how do you find out what you don't know? How do you get it to do things that you don't know how to be able to do?
It's great observations. Yeah, great points. It leads me to thinking about a few different case studies over the years, and a simple one is Kodak. When digital started to be on the rise, Kodak kind of doubled down about making the efficiency and the scalability of their physical film production improved. Mm-hmm. So, to their board at the time and to their leadership, like, they were focusing on what they were good at. And you brought up a critical point now, and most leaders are either not embracing this, not aware of it, or a combination thereof, because they have to reimagine and reinvent how they conduct business and what their business is. Let's look at Kodak as a simple example. We all know how that story ends. It's the absolute monopoly of film or close to it, devolving into nothing in bankruptcy. We talk about Nokia. My first phones were Motorola and Nokia. This is going back 25 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about where are those brands now. I mean, Motorola is trying to make a new play, and Nokia might be as well at some point, but they're gone. They've lost entire things. Let's look today
Mm-hmm.
at Google. I came up with Google. You came up with Google. I mean, Google, everyone knows Google. And the reality is that I've noticed trends in my own search where like, I won't go to Google because I want to get targeted specific feedback, not, 8 million links that they got me in 0.0006 seconds. Like, I'm not really that impressed by that metric. So brands like Google, like Alphabet, obviously, like are trying to figure out like, how is this going to impact their core businesses? We can look at WPP, the advertising conglomerate, and how that's shifting dramatically. The CEO of one of the biggest ad agencies just resigned because like the entire industry is turned on its head. And this is from organizations that really don't know what they're doing yet. This is just a few starts with smart people deploying AI. So once it gets orchestrated and executed well, industries are going to topple and shift dramatically. And I think that that the leaders, and this is a larger trend I see, and it's very concentrated like a laser in the AI space, which is like leaders. Let's just for aging purposes say like my age and older are like looking at the days they have left are far less than the days they've put in already, and they don't want to risk what they have built, but at the same time, by not risking, many times they're taking the biggest risks. So I think that's the key, right? It's intelligent risk, but it is risk that has to be leapt to some degree because there is a lot of unknown. And this is not sounding like a commercial. Like this is why we created the Executive AI Institute, because we have a collection of experiences across a vast array of applications, let's just say. So I think that organizations that are intelligent are understanding that they need to talk to people who have this kind of hybrid experience and can sit there and look at it and say, listen, there's a couple of different ways to tell if this is working. Back to the subject of this particular call. How do you see if it's working? How can I see if it's working? You can look at the return on AI driven initiatives. You can look at the time to decision or time to action, things that AI is going to incredibly transform. You can look at the AI augmented productivity per employee. These are three simple metrics that I just mentioned that will quantify and subsequently qualify the investment, right? So you're going to say, well, we invested this much in our whatever finance team, and they were able to make this decision quicker. They were able to prove this is a better way to go, and they were able to reduce the time to market for new products that they're launching. So these are really measurable.
Which kind of makes me, if we're looking at the measurable bit, it sounds like there's 3 or 4 real key indicators for at a board level there to be able to do. So would you say that they're your main 3 key indicators for a boardroom? What's your thoughts?
I mean, my reflex is yes, but then it really depends on the organization and where that board is and what the challenges that board is addressing right now. And again, this is where the kind of holistic look that we're giving clients comes in, because you can't look at this in a vacuum. You can't just say, oh, your industry is marketing. Well, marketing does this, or advertising does this, or marketing tech does this. You have to understand the nuance of it. So it's something that I've dealt with a lot in my career, which is I can't just flip a switch and know what to do for you specifically. Like I need to interview and talk to your leaders. I need to understand like how your business operates. I need to, simple things that every management consultant does. You can't, if you come in static and say, here's your answers, I promise you they're not the answers.
No. And which actually kind of leads me back to the conversation we're having at the beginning, where we're saying, does AI kill creativity in many ways? And yet everybody's there going, oh my God, it's such an uncertain future. We could do something so new. We could do something completely different than we've ever done before. And yet there's a fearfulness towards that. So they're going, well, how can we look at something that is going to disrupt the status quo significantly and then go, there's no space for innovation? Oh my God, it's going to take that away from people. When realistically, up until this point, people have not been innovating for a long, long time. And now the opportunity for any organization is to go, we are going to do something that is going to change the game. It kind of reminds me when ages ago, when iPhone App Store first came about, people would be like, I've got an idea for an app. I'm like, great, what's your idea for an app? And they go, well, it could do this, 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 this. Okay. But the idea is such a fraction of whether it is a success or not. It is, it could be the best idea that's ever been on the planet, but everything else around that matters so much more. And now the difference is, as an organization, is you might just have your new app idea, and it might be great, but now you can actually build an AI workforce around you to be able to go, how's it marketing? How are we going to keep in contact with people? How do we make sure that we're scaling? And I suppose my question for you on that would be, how do you know when an AI pilot is ready to scale? When what's the key indicator that that's what we've got to do next?
Yeah, great question. And again, I do think, without the risk of sounding deflective, like, I think that depends on the organization and what their appetite is, and how much time they have to address the particular challenge they're facing. I do think that they reveal themselves pretty intuitively, in the sense that if you're looking to streamline go-to-market strategy for new products, and you're testing it, and I think that the efficacy reveals itself really quickly when it's deployed intelligently, and when we work with clients to make sure that they understand the full scope, because I do think that there's a scope question, or scope confusion, which I think people are imagining AI's influence being very, bottom level. And the organizations that we're engaging with understand, like, this is a thought change at the highest levels of organization. Full stop. From boards and C-suite and the decision makers, this requires, and I say this all the time, this requires a lot of courage to not only understand, but to embrace the I don't know. This is a hallmark I've been saying for anyone who knows or works with me. The sign of a great leader to me is someone who is easy with the I don't know. Right. So the issue historically, at least in my experience working, not just myself personally, but as a consultant, are leaders who think that they need to be omnipotent, and they're pulling things, I'll say, to be polite, out of the sky. Right. And it's like, where did this come from? This makes no sense. And then people go down that road because that's the mandate from leadership. Right. And then it takes a week or 6 months or a year down this ineffective, off the top of their head road to realize, this is not working. We have to course correct. We have to go back to the beginning. And then instead of being just a little bit off, now you're farther down the line. You're totally off track. And that's the risk. This is the thing I said before, like, the biggest risk is not taking a risk. Right. And I think this is true for many things in life, but this is absolutely true for leaders in enterprise right now, because they know it's coming. I think there's a propensity in senior leadership to kind of ignore things that aren't loud until they're impossible to ignore. Terrible. And here's the thing: the real problem is, and I have no idea, know the guy personally, but the CEO who just left, the advertising CEO I was talking about, like, he left and cashed out, and he's probably at an age where he doesn't have to deal with this anymore, but he's leaving the organization in quite a lurch, because now they have to kind of reinvent themselves. Find the money when clients and revenue are dwindling, right? So this is the challenge, right? It's a very tough economy for every industry globally, and it's getting tougher. Let's just be clear. This is not a trend that's reversing itself anytime soon. So you can wait, as you said, and then it's going to come, crushing you in the face, or you can take some, courageous action, of course, grounded in fact and professionalism and expertise, but take the leap. Because if you're waiting on the shoreline, it's like the old adage of, like, the person in the flood, and, like, God sends like a helicopter, and then the guy dies and he's in heaven. And, like, you didn't help me because I sent the helicopter. I said, you got to do God. You got to get up. So I think that's my bottom line for this. Like, leaders who are really curious about what it's going to do to them are going to either find out passively and as suboptimal, to put it politely, or they're going to take a leap creatively and say, we need to engage with experts and find solutions to these problems that we're experiencing now and foresee experiencing in the future. Let's see where we're going, and then be able to take those actions and take that step. It's really important. It's a critical time, and time will tell. I have no hesitation in that foreshadowing. Leaders don't take action. Action will take leaders.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably the best sentiment to be able to end on for today's show. We've got one question in there at the moment. If there's anybody else who would like to be able to add any questions, looking at today, obviously we are looking at the outcomes. And I think it's just been a really interesting discussion, because it's obviously one of those things that everybody wants to be able to make sure that what they're doing is optimum, that it's efficient, that it is producing the tangible outcomes that they want. And this is a new game. As we said, there's not always the examples to be able to precedence this against, to be able to say, hey, this is what good looks like, because good is very much being invented at the moment. And there will be experimentation, there will be failures, there will be successes, and it's a lot to be able to take on. And that's obviously with what we're trying to do with the Executive AI Institute, is to support people on that journey, because there is good things to be able to look at as well, to be able to help guide that. So question that we have here is, can AI help me with writing funding applications? This is something I've done a lot of talking about. My background initially was in the nonprofit sector, and writing fundraising bids and all of that kind of stuff was a day-to-day thing that we needed to be able to go and do. And I think that this is, it's a really simple answer. Yes, there is a really good way to be able to do it as well. You don't have to have extensive tools to be able to do it. That being said, I do know charities that are investing 3 million over the next 3 years in AI for fundraising and bids. And it goes once again to say, if you're an organization that relies on fundraising applications and your competition is investing the money in, there might be opportunities there that you are missing out on. But if you are looking to be able to use generative AI to be able to do it, really simple technique that I would go through is to go take the thing that you're applying for and get your AI primed. So give it all the information, give it the information on the organization, give it the information on the grant, and then give it the information on your organization, everything like that. And then when you start to answer those questions, you can essentially have a model that is trained, we call it, RAG, to be able to kind of create a RAG bot on it, which is where you've augmented the model itself. And then essentially it will help you to be able to tailor those answers, but also tailor it specifically for the grant. So really good question. Definitely a key thing that we can utilize it for. So thank you so much for that. Anything else you want to be able to add, Jonscott, before we wrap up for today?
I think, what the question was great. I think also what we're seeing now is understanding what's possible is going to require effort. It's not a passive endeavor. And I think many leaders today are dealing with so many challenges in so many directions. And it's a very isolating place to be a board member or a C-suite leader. And these XComs and rooms that I've been with them, it's a very isolating place. I think that to be inclusive and to drive trust through the organization requires a bit of courage. And I have a friend who can't for some reason get through, ask me, should this reside with the chief information officer, the head of tech, chief technical officer, CTO? And my reflex is probably not, only because they're managing an enormous workload to begin with. And then trying to put this entire other job, it doesn't need to be a new position right now. Get a task force together, get people who are interested, who are curious, who are intelligent in your organization together to kind of model out and maybe pick a department to start with. Obviously we can help with these things. This is a collection of experiences and people. This is not a mandate that comes from the CTO of an organization. And I would imagine CTOs who are swamped more than ever before don't necessarily need to add this entire new, not just piece, this entire new series of massive responsibility to their already swamped roles. So I think that getting a group together that's interested in furthering the organization, that thinks courageously from all different levels. And we've seen this workshop move, we've seen these type of things work well. I think when I first started my career after graduate school, I put together a training program for new hires. And there were new hires in sales and marketing and finance, and they had to go through a marketing rotation, sales rotation, a field sales rotation, a factory rotation where they're like pick packing. And it was met with incredible resistance when I was proposing this. And I was 23 years old at the time. And I said, this is the only way you're going to build well-rounded leaders. And I think that the same thing now, that same organization or every organization, if they have a training program like that, AI and its impact should be a core rotation of this. This should be another rotation. And that's cutting edge and cutting edge. That's innovative for this time frame, right? This is far from cutting edge. But this is just an innovation saying, we're going to include AI as a rotation for this. But who's going to drive that, right?
Yeah.
we have been asked to help organizations with this, but it's also a matter of how are you going to make sure that your teams are skilled up as much as they can be. And listen, here's the reality. To achieve bottom line results, not everyone in your organization presently is going to be on board when those results happen. That's just the reality of it. So if you're upskilling and dynamic look at how this is going to impact your operation and enterprise results in some people leaving, that's part of the process. This is part of any healthy organization is going to have healthy attrition. So I think this is an important piece too. If you're going to upskill and someone's like, yeah, I can't go along with this, I'm going to find some other job that's, at still my pace or my level, then, left them. It's, okay. And I think that, innovative leaders and leaders that are dynamic and have courage and want to grow their enterprise are going to pay attention to these things, because there is a bottom line way and metrics to measure this. And there is easily quantifiable to boards and to organizational leadership. That's
definitely. Definitely love it. I think when you're saying, does it fit with the chief technology officer? Does it sit with the chief information officer? I think there's an opportunity here for, where's your chief innovation officer? And this is one of your task force that sits within that innovation part, rather than trying to make it try and fit into something that maybe already exists. So, we are looking at task force. We are looking at ways of being able to connect people in different ways. And your organization, as I said, one of the best ways to get outcomes at the moment is going to be from thinking about what the mindset is at the organization and thinking about how that shifts with AI as a tool that's there. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jonscott. It was great to be able to have this conversation again, and we look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming, and for those of you watching on repeat. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye.